Hello and welcome to a blockbuster episode of the WION Sports Broadband edition with me, Digvijay Singh Deo. My guest today is a great of world football. He's a two-time winner of the English top flight title. John Barnes joins me from Merseyside. John, thank you so much for joining us from England. How has this period of the lockdown been for you?
Well, it's been great for me because I like a quiet life. I don't like the circumstances in terms of obviously COVID-19 and the destruction that it's causing and the upset it's causing. But in terms of a quiet life whereby I'm at home with my children, we go for little walks and everybody's being nice and everything is quiet, it suits me down to the ground. So I'm not bored. People get bored because they're not allowed to go out and go to the pub, but I'm different. I quite like this quiet time.
Okay, nice to hear that. But the numbers coming out of England and the news coming out of England is pretty scary. You know, lots and lots of cases, lots and lots of deaths. How has this sort of affected the psyche of the people in the UK?
Well, of course, you know, if you look at the two biggest hit countries, England and America, that has a lot to do with our sense of what freedom is and the rights of people. Because, of course, you know, in the West, we like human rights and we don't like anyone to tell us what to do. But in a case like this, which a virus which doesn't take human rights into consideration, whereby whether you feel that is your human right to be able to do whatever you want to do and the government can't tell you what to do, it's a time for us to be more vigilant. It's a time for us to be stronger with people who are saying, well, I'm an individual with my own human rights, so I can do whatever I want to and you can't stop me. You can see what's happening in America. So suppose other countries who are much stronger with their citizens in terms of telling them what to do have had better results in this. So I suppose it doesn't surprise me that England and America have got two of the worst records because of our perception of what our human rights are.
Okay. Each country has dealt with this differently. You know, one of India's leading sports persons, one of the icons of Indian sport is Viswanathan Anand, who's a 5-time world chess champion. And he's actually stuck in Germany during this entire lockdown phase. I was just chatting with him last month. And he had an interesting point to say. He said the world was moving too fast and the virus sort of took advantage. What do you think are the lessons we as a human race need to take on board from this current crisis?
Well, first of all, this is not the first time this has happened in history. It has happened before, and it happened to a much more devastating effect in the past. You can go back for 2,000 years, and they would have had instances like this, whereby people may say it's a lesson that the world needs to learn in terms of empathy, togetherness, love, peace, happiness. And what lessons did our human beings of the past learn? Nothing. Because we can still see the devastation, death, inhumanity in terms of how we treat each other. And now we're saying the exact same thing. Now, I'm sure people of the past would have said it, but did they actually mean it? Or do they wait for a period of time when this is forgotten about, which can be 5, 10, 20 years, and then just going back to being our normal selfish selves? So as much as we're saying, yes, we're going to learn a lesson from this, people have said that in the past. We should be that way when we don't have a virus, when we don't have a pandemic. We shouldn't need something like this to teach us to love each other and to respect each other. So I am hopeful, because I'm living in this period, that we will learn from it. But if you look at the experience of the past and past generations of people, did they learn from it? And why will we be any different? Unless the powers that be really make a change. And unfortunately, I think once we then get back to normality, whatever that is, even if it's a new normal, we're still going to see the same people being greedy and selfish, unfortunately.
Yes, that seems to be the perception across the board, that humanity will sort of get out of this pause and instantly there'll be a run to get back into the race, as you mentioned. But for you personally, the virus also struck pretty close home, because your former teammate and manager, Kenny Dalglish, he was initially diagnosed as well. A lot of people you must be knowing in English football have been diagnosed with the coronavirus pandemic. Thankfully, they've all made a sort of a swift recovery. But just goes to show that no one is safe.
Absolutely, regardless of who you are, how much money you have, what color you are, because of course, there's certain groups of people, particularly in the West, who feel they're untouchable. And until something like this happens, and they have been untouchable in terms of the relationship they have with the rest of the world, people around the world, impact that people can have on their lives. And you have certain groups of superior people whose lives aren't impacted at all because of the way that the socio-economic climate is in the world, and they feel they're untouchable. Whereas something like this comes along and everybody's touchable. So it reaches everyone. And I have sympathy for everyone. No more so for Kenny Dalglish than I do for, I've got 2 children who are doctors working in the NHS. Fortunately, they're safe. But we have people who have got it who have been trying to save people's lives. So it's a time for all of us to come together and have empathy with everyone, not just a particular group of people because they're famous or because they are an elite group or anything like that.
Yes, that's fair enough. And I think, look at us here in India. I've been actually at home since the 20th of March. My entire team is at home. And in fact, I've had to adapt in doing these shows out of my drawing room. But just talking about football, because, since it's been close to 2 months since the Premier League was suspended, a lot of people since then have lost jobs. A lot of people have had to undergo pay cuts, all that happening. So considering all of that, do you think now it's the right time to restart the sport as all this, it's leading up to that in England?
If it's safe. There are many more people, thousands and millions more people who have lost their jobs and their homes who aren't footballers, who work in the football industry. So why are we separating football from the rest of society? Why are we feeling more sorry for football than we do for somebody who works in a factory or somebody who, just is a bus driver? So once again, we shouldn't just look at football and say it's important for us to get back to football. It's important for all of us to get back to our lives. And in many respects, particularly if you're talking about football at the very highest level. I'm not talking about lower division footballers who financially may be struggling. Footballers at the very highest level can probably not go back to football for the next year or two and still be financially okay without losing their houses. Where you have normal people who have normal jobs who can't afford to do that. But the most important thing is for us to be safe. So, relatively safe. If we're waiting for the virus to disappear, we're never going to go back to playing football for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So it's not a question of waiting for a guarantee that it is impossible for anybody to get it, be it a football fan, be a football player. If that's the case, we're never going to go back. But it's a question of then saying, well, when is it time for people to go back to work, knowing that there still will be a slight risk, but the risk will be less than it was last week, the week before. If it's going to take 2, 3 months, we don't know. But we're going to have to get back to some sort of normality, and it will become the new normal. And once we get used to that, we will adapt. That's the great thing about human beings. That's how we have adapted for hundreds of thousands of years. We aren't the strongest and the biggest creatures on the planet, but how have we dominated the planet? Because we have adapted better than any other species, and that's what we will do under these circumstances.
Mr. Barnes, just looking at the way the Bundesliga has started, there is a precedent now. There is talk that La Liga could get back by June 11th. But, it seems that everyone seems to be in a race to emulate these two leagues. But the fact remains that every country has been at different levels in dealing with this pandemic. And as you said, perhaps that needs to be factored in instead of rushing in just because these two countries are perhaps, one has started, one is on the verge of starting.
Absolutely. You have to look at the individual aspect of where you are in your own country, how many cases you have, how prevalent it is. So you can't just look at other countries and say, this is what we're going to do. You have to, and I don't think that the English Premier League are doing that. I think they're really taking government advice in terms of what's happening in this country for when we're actually going to go back. So, and that is the right thing to do.
Okay, but I need to ask you, you said you've been at home and you've enjoyed your time, but have you been tuning into the Bundesliga, which is restarted, and what do you make of this entire atmospherics there? I find it rather bizarre that it's a contact sport. The players are out there playing football, but on the stands you're seeing the substitutes and the support staff all sort of maintaining social distancing. It may be great for optics, but it beats the purpose. If you're out there playing sport, then everyone needs to be treated equally.
That's under normal circumstances. These are unprecedented times. So if you're waiting for everyone to be treated normally in terms of fans coming to the stadium to hug and to not do that, then we're going to have to wait for a much longer period. So we have to decide, if you want to go back, it's like going back to training. The players in England now are going back to training, but they can't go back to training in the way they trained before. And if you're going to say, well, if you can't train properly in terms of hugging each other and just doing normal practices, we're not going to, why go back? Well, then they won't go back for 6 months or whatever. So you have to go back and tailor it to these times. So, of course, if that is what they have to do in terms of no money in the stadium and adhering to certain protocols, and while people are then judging it from times in the past, you can't, because these are unprecedented times. As I said, if you want to get back to work, not just football, but I'll use football as an example, you have to go back to football and go along with the guidelines of what's necessary now. If you want to go back to your factory will also be different than what it was. You can't say it's not like it was in the past. If you're going to wait for it to be like it was in the past, we'll be here for years. So, you have to adapt once again.
Okay. Another big concern which we're seeing in the Bundesliga and probably will affect a lot of other leagues when football resumes is the susceptibility to injury. A lot of clubs perhaps are starting to have full training right now. But do you think that this rush to start is something which needs to be avoided, or else you'll just see more and more players breaking down?
I don't think you'll see more and more players breaking down, because what will happen, you'll have a period of time whereby you will have training for, and don't forget, players never stopped training. They stopped training together, but all the individual training that you actually did as a footballer in the gym, in your house, or going for a run, that has been going on for a while before you've been able to come back to your clubs. Now you're back with the clubs. It may be more than a month before you actually start to play again. It's very similar to a normal season without the virus, whereby you have the end of season, you're then off for 6 weeks, whereby you go on holiday, and then you come back, you train for a month, you then play. You may get injured in the first, part of the season, because you have, but there's no difference now. I don't see why players are going to get more injured now than they do without the pandemic. At the end of a season, when you have 6 weeks off, you go on holiday, you don't train, you come back to train for a month, and you go and play, and you may pick up injuries. I don't see why now it's going to be any different. And in fact, I would think that now would be better, because players have not been on holiday. When you finish playing football at the end of the season and there's no virus, you actually go on holiday, you go drinking, you eat whatever you want to do, you come back unfit, you then train, then you can get injured. But the players have never been that. The players have not stopped training to go on holiday, to get unfit, to drink beer, because they've always still been in and around the environment whereby they've had to keep themselves fit. So I don't think that's an issue. Apart from players who will naturally get injured with or without the pandemic.
Lots of uncertainty, and a lot of these I must add, and you will agree that these are all a lot of things which we don't know, we are predicting could happen. But one thing we can predict, Mr. Barnes, is that when the English season resumes, Liverpool will be crowned Premier League champions. Will it be an albatross sort of off the neck? The fact that they've finally achieved what has taken so long. I mean, your team was the last one, the team you were a part of, to win the Premier League or the first division back then.
Well, of course, first of all, I'm hoping for the season to start and for the season to finish, because there's a lot of people agitating and pushing for the season to be cancelled and then just start next season, which is ridiculous, because just like Germany, you can easily, whenever you decide to restart the season or whenever you decide to play football again, it'll take 6 weeks, 2 months to finish the season, go straight into the next season. Now, of course, it won't be an albatross around the neck at all, because what's important is, yes, unless a disaster happens, we're going to win the league. But then what happens for the next 30 years after that? So it's not a question of us winning the league, being so happy that it doesn't matter whether we win it again. The marker of success is the consistency that you show in being successful all the time. So Jurgen Klopp will be pushing them to then say, okay, yes, we've won it, leave it, forget about it. Yes, we've done it. But what are we going to do next year and the year after and the year after? So for me, hopefully it's a start of us being competitive enough to challenge for the league title and the Champions League every year as we did in the past. So it'll be fantastic. But as soon as we've done it, I've forgotten about it. Let's look forward.
Okay, and that consistency we are seeing, because let's not forget the last season, they came very close as well. And it was just a great Man City team which sort of denied them. What do you think has been the change? The change in both teams to see Liverpool rampant. They did lose a game till February, and as we talk right now, 25 points clear.
Well, don't forget, Liverpool only lost one game last year as well. So it's not as if they're doing better this year than they did last year. In fact, they are playing better football, in my opinion, last year than they have done this year. It's just that Manchester City were unstoppable. Whereas this year, Manchester City have dipped. I think mainly because of the injury they've had to key players in key positions, mainly at the back. But Liverpool have continued to be consistent. So nothing has changed from last year to this year. And in fact, if you look at this year, we won the Champions League last year, finished second in the league with 97 points and lost one game. This year, we're not in the Champions League. We're top of the league, but we're not in the Champions League. And we did better last year. So Jurgen Klopp is maximizing potential to be consistent. And Man City have been inconsistent this season. That's the difference. Those two teams will still be better than everybody else. But the difference between those two teams is the inconsistency of Man City, which I think is really down to the injuries they've had. But I'm happy about that.
Yeah, you aren't complaining. It's been a long wait. But Mr. Barnes, have Liverpool sort of set a benchmark now in the Premier League in terms of how to rebuild after a period of great time waiting for success? The fact is, Jurgen Klopp came in, the club gave him a lot of time. They backed what he wanted in the transfer market, gave him the players he wanted, and now we are seeing the signs of a new generation of, as you said, of a new generation of a world-beating team. Is that a lesson now for the other teams who this sort of hire and fire policy in English football needs to take a look at what Liverpool have done so well?
It's not a question of what Liverpool have done well. It's a question of what's the right thing to do, which has been around forever. It's not just since Jurgen Klopp has come. Sir Alex Ferguson was given time at Manchester United. Then when he was given time, he was given the support, he was given the trust, and he was then told, you are the man in charge. Players are more important than you. Chelsea did it with Jose Mourinho at the same time. And now Liverpool have done it with Jurgen Klopp. So it's nothing new. That's always been the recipe for success. Give the manager time if you trust him. Give him the resources. And more importantly, let the players know that he is the man in charge. Player power is a big thing here now in England. All over the world, whereby players are much more important than the managers. And you can see the teams who are inconsistent because the players have been the one who has, if they've lost, you blame the manager, you fire the manager. But if you get a manager like a Jose Mourinho, Jurgen Klopp, Pochettino, Arsene Wenger, these great managers, why do you undermine them by making the players feel more important? So it's no surprise to me that the two best teams over the last 2 years have been the two clubs whose managers have been the man in charge of the club. Not the players, not the owners, it's been about the managers. Every other club, be it, well, you can look at Ancelotti at Chelsea, he's a great manager. Conte at Chelsea, he's a great manager, but he's on the mind because when they've lost, they blame him and not the players. If Liverpool lose a game, we're not going to blame Jurgen Klopp. If Jurgen Klopp drops Mo Salah, we're not going to boo Jurgen Klopp. We trust him, and so therefore the players see that whatever the manager says, he's in charge, we have to do. At other clubs, when they've lost and they booed the manager, that has empowered the players to feel that they are more important, and it doesn't matter to them if they lose, because if they lose, they don't get blamed and they don't get criticised, whereas they will at Liverpool or Manchester City. So that is why those two teams for me are the two best teams.
Okay, I'm sort of perhaps going a bit ahead. I'm looking at the league resuming or whatever happens, Liverpool winning the title. Because at the moment, as you said, it's ridiculous. You know, the lead they have, it's shame if they won't be given the title. But what will this mean to Liverpool, the club, the city? We saw those great pictures of what happened last year when they won the Champions League. The entire city seemed to have been turned red. What will this mean to Liverpool, the area where you are, for them to finally win the Premier League?
Well, for half of the city, it won't mean much because half of the city are Evertonians, so it won't mean much to them. In fact, they'll be very disappointed if we do. And for us, it'll be joy. But it'll be joy until the season starts and we have to forget about it. Because if if we're champions of this season and we win the championship, we are going to be league champions. And let's talk about, to explain it chronologically, forget about the virus. Let's say if we play football from the season starts in August until May. So let's just say that. So we'll be champions at the beginning of August. We'll be champions until the end of May. And if we've had that attitude that we are still champions when next April comes, but we're the champions because we won it the year before, but we're 10th in the league, but we're still the champions. So we have to forget about being champions as soon as the first ball is kicked. As soon as the first ball is kicked, because we're going to be champions at the end of that season. But if our attitude is that we're champions, we will forget about doing it again, playing the games, winning those games, and forgetting about that we're champions. We have to play like we're not champions. We have to play with the same hunger to become champions again next year. So what it'll mean, for me, it'll be fantastic, it'll be joyous, but once the season starts, it's got to be forgotten about.
Yes, we've seen that hurt teams in the past, and I think the closest example is Chelsea of late and also Leicester. But Mr. Barnes, there's been a lot of talk right now. There's talk of Sadio Mane moving on. There's talk of Timo Werner coming in. Even Mbappe has been linked. But the larger question is this. For a long time, Liverpool were a selling club. You know, they sold players and gotten replacements. But do you now think that because of the consistency, because of the success they've had in the last 3 or 4 years under Jurgen Klopp, they are now at the same position as the Real Madrid and the Barcelona to attract the top talent in the world?
Every club's a selling club. Barcelona sell their players. They sell their players. I mean, they may not sell Messi. Real Madrid sell their players. Real Madrid sold Neymar. That's the financial implications of football now. So when you talk about attracting players, what attracts players is the salaries they're going to get. So regardless of who you are, Mo Salah, Mane, anybody, if all of a sudden any club, and you may say, oh, they're going to go to Real Madrid, but if some Chinese owner or some owner from wherever, multimillionaire owner buys Coventry City, and they say we're going to pay you £1 million a week, you're going to go. And this is what modern football is. So the whole idea of us now being able to keep our players, yes, financially we can, and the fact that we're the European champions or the league champions, yes, but ultimately, players come and players go. And that's why I say to the fans now, support the club, not the players. Yes, you support the players while they're at your club, but if they decide to leave your club, and they want to leave your club, do not try and keep them. Because if you try and keep them, and you keep them, and the club is doing particularly well, you will lose those players. Torres left when he was a fantastic player. Suarez left. Coutinho left. And I'm hoping for Mo Salah and Mane not to leave, but as you know, in modern football, it may happen. And if they decide to go, for whatever reason, you'll have to say, thank you very much for being here. But if you do not want to be here anymore for whatever reason, you have to go. If you then over-empower them to make them feel more important than the club by blaming the club for not keeping them, that will make them feel more powerful, and that will give them power over the club and the manager. And then when things aren't going well, they won't be accountable for the results and when they lose, because you've made them feel more special than their teammates. And that doesn't happen at Liverpool. And I can guarantee you, if any player falls out of line by either wanting to leave the club or going to the press to say he's not happy, Jurgen Klopp will say, no matter who you are, you leave this club. And that's the right way to be.
Okay. You touched upon the big money and all of that, but where do you think this pandemic is going to leave the transfer market? Those big fees, sort of, which we were hearing, 100 mil, 120 mil, all that doesn't seem possible now.
Well, it doesn't seem possible in the short term. And I'm hoping, because I've always been a fan of a salary cap, like they do in American football and in American sport, whereby one club, because they have the financial clout to then just buy the best players, can just buy the best players and win. And it's not just about transfer fees, it's also about salaries. But I think what's going to happen now because of this is you're going to see that transfer fees will come down because people will be worried about the future. But as you asked me the question about what is going to happen to humanity, are we going to adopt a different way of looking at things because now we understand that we have to be together, we have to show love and respect. And I said we will do for a short period of time, then we're going to go back to being our own selfish selves. In football, I'm hoping for it not to happen, but it could happen. That in the short term, when people remember how financially precarious we were in the pandemic, and of course in 1 year, 2 years, we can still remember it. In 5 years' time, we may just go back to saying, well, let's buy a player for 300 million because that can't happen again. So, but I'm hoping for football to do something about that. It's not a question of whether the clubs do it themselves. That can be enforced on clubs to manage their finances better, which would be for the good of football, also to make it more competitive. That you can't just have a benefactor who's the richest man in the world to then say, right, I'm going to buy a club, and because I can buy all the best players in the world and they will come to me, I'm going to win the league. That's not what sport and competition and life should be about.
Okay. Before I go, Mr. Barnes, Jordan Henderson just said that, it would be strange to win the Premier League title at Anfield without any fans. But sadly, that's going to be the new normal, at least for the immediate period. But my question is, when Jordan Henderson and his team lift that Premier League trophy, how would John Barnes celebrate?
I'll celebrate with a quiet glass of wine. And for 20 seconds, I'll be excited, like I was when we won the Champions League against Tottenham. And then, a few hours later, it'll be forgotten about because we have to do it again next year. And depending on how we treat our success and how our attitude is towards it, will determine our attitude next season. So from a professional perspective, from a fan perspective, it's going to be great. But if I want Liverpool to do it again next year, we've got to forget about it as soon as we've done it. Not as soon as we've done it. We celebrate for a little bit before.
Yes, there has to be at some point of time a celebration with the fans whenever it is possible. But as you rightly pointed out, it's about building a legacy. It's about building the next generation. It can't be that you win the title and wait another 30 years because fans sort of are more impatient these days than perhaps they were back in your days. But Mr. Barnes, thank you so much for joining us. An absolute pleasure for us having you on the show over here in India. Lots of Liverpool fans over here, everyone waiting to see Liverpool win the Premier League. But I think the first and immediate concern right now is that every country slowly eases restrictions so that life can get back to normal. And as you said, when life gets back to normal, perhaps we just take a bit of a pause and just think of what we lost in this entire crisis and just be a bit rather reserved when life resumes.
Thank you very much. All the best. Thank you.